CFL 110, your weekly trip around the biggest stories in the Canadian Football League with Jeff Hamilton and Andrew Hustler Paterson.
Hey, what's going on, CFL fans? Welcome to another edition of CFL 110 right here on the Winnipeg Sports Talk YouTube and podcast channel. Great to have you with us. What a week it was in the Canadian Football League. Got all the starting quarterbacks back and had some great action in the three-down game. Of course, last week's episode of CFL 110 in some ways was less about the games this weekend and more about the big announcement last week from CFL Commissioner Stewart Johnston on the changes coming to the Canadian Football League. We'll focus in on the games today, but if you're a regular CFL 110 watcher, we did have a chance later on last week to catch up with CFL Commissioner Stewart Johnston for about a half-hour conversation about the changes and the future of the league. If you missed that on WST, that will be at the end of this episode. So Jeff Hamilton and I will get to all of our business, talking about the games of the weekend, looking ahead to three very big games in the league this week, and then we'll have the full interview with Stewart Johnston, so stick around to the end of today's program for that if you missed it. What a week it was. Let's bring in the Hammer himself, Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. And Hammer, last week was all about the future. This episode, all about the present as things get tighter in both divisions in the CFL coming out of the weekend.
Yeah, Huss. I mean, I think the joke that's kind of going around right now is no one's safe. I mean, we'll get into it. I think there's one team that's a bit safer than others, that being obviously the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Again, they're not playing their best football right now. They're still in a little bit of danger, but it's really become a toss bag, which I think is really, Huss, mixed bag even for this weekend with the results, right? It wasn't exactly they've made the last 4 or 5 weeks here interesting, but they weren't exactly close games this weekend. Again, we'll get into all that stuff now. It's just, it felt like a bit of an unorthodox weekend in the Canadian Football League. Usually, we're kind of at the edge of our seats. Wasn't saying there wasn't some of that this weekend, but there was certainly more, I would say, statement games than maybe some of the previous weeks we've covered.
Yeah, well, shout out to the Riders and Elks for giving us at least one thrilling finish in the Canadian Football League. But let's start off from Friday night's game, the return of Davis Alexander to the Montreal Alouettes, and he did once again what he's done every time he started in the Canadian Football League, and that is win. They rolled over the Calgary Stampeders to the tune of 38-20, and Davis Alexander didn't miss a beat. 350 yards through the air, one touchdown pass, did get vultured a bit by 3 short yardage TDs by Shea Paterson. But, we've been waiting all season long for the Alouettes to get healthy again. It's seeming like that's happening right about now, led by their leader, Davis Alexander. And they looked full marks for their performance against a Calgary team that's all of a sudden dealing with some adversity of their own.
Yeah, Huss, you took the words right out of my mouth. Firstly, I think with you look at the Montreal Alouettes, it was only a few weeks ago, Huss, that we were kind of leaving them for dead a little bit. We were talking about what their chances of holding on to that second place in the East Division was, and now I think you're flipping the plot after a few wins here. We're thinking, is this Montreal's division now, given what we've seen from Hamilton over the last few weeks? I think it's a really interesting one, and then switch it over to Calgary and what's going on with the Stampeders, Huss? I mean, this was a team that same time frame about a month ago, I was ready to, I wasn't ready. I was confidently saying this is the best team in the league. This is a group that's led by Vernon Adams Jr. that's brought in a new culture. Dave Dickinson, all the the errors he might have made in previous seasons, those were long gone. This is a new era for the for the Stamps, and what we've seen the last few weeks here has shown anything but a team that's surging, and certainly they're in a situation where they're now holding on to their second place. Again, we'll get into the kind of standings conversation when we kind of do more of the off game stories. But I look at two teams just going in the exact opposite directions. And as you mentioned, Davis-Alexandre, this is a team that is hitting their stride at the right time, winning games at the right time, and now has their healthy quarterback. That record, 9-0 to start his career. That's an incredible number. The confidence is there. I thought Davis-Alexandre's performance, you could tell he was pretty excited early on. He was kind of just missing passes, overthrew a couple darts, but by the final whistle, this guy was as smooth as butter. He was rolling out of the pocket, finding his receivers. He was playing smart football, and that makes Montreal a really, really dangerous team because of their quarterback, because of their defense. And really, I felt like this game was a bit of a statement game, right? They'd had a couple good performances under McLeod Bethel-Thompson, including that win over the Saskatchewan Roughriders that no one saw coming. Now I think a lot of people are going to be expecting the Alouettes to dominate. Well, Calgary is kind of holding their breath, I think, right now, trying to figure things out.
Yeah, Alexander just makes such a difference in the Montreal lineup. And listen, we were going to say that about most of the starting quarterbacks in the league, but the contrast from the way they looked during the time that he was out to a team that just throttled a Calgary team that has been excellent against the best teams in the league this year was certainly on display. Montreal now just one game back of Hamilton, although the Ticats do have the tiebreaker if they ended up finishing tied at the end of the regular season. Game number 2 is a late night game on Friday and made us 2 for 2 with our picks against the spread for the week, as the Argos didn't get the job done to win, but they did get the job done to cover. But in a little bit of defense by the BC Lions, which has not been something we've been talking about very much. This game went under the total. I thought this one would be pushing 60 points. Did not even get to 50. BC hangs on 27-22 against the Toronto Argonauts. Thoughts on the late night game on Friday?
Yeah, a big part of that, not eclipsing the over or not really being a high scoring game, Huss, was because Nathan Rourke had 3 picks in the first half, right? It was they were moving the ball a little bit, would get into a situation, and then kudos to Toronto's defense who stepped in front of a few balls, really gave their opportunity, or really gave the Argos an opportunity to win that game, or at least to stay in close. This is, I think this one, particularly the score, Huss, shows a little bit, closer of a game than it actually was. When you actually break down Toronto's scoring, Lirim Hau'olahu, their kicker, accounted for 15 of the 22 points, and that touchdown at the end, their lone touchdown, it came at the end of the game, kind of in this desperate, almost kind of comeback situation. Not almost, was a comeback situation, needed it. Didn't end up getting it. Arbuckle was strip sacked. That was the end of the game. But when you actually do break down the score, and as I mentioned, Lirim Hau'olahu accounted for 15 of the 22 points. He had 5 field goals, 3 of which were 50 yards or more. So it wasn't like they were getting the job done in and around the end zone. They were getting a lot of their points, barely getting into the BC Lions. And I just thought the BC Lions offense looked a little bit off. You saw some good performances from, Keon Hatcher, from Justin McInnes. You saw a little bit of an uncharacteristic game from Nathan Rourke, who didn't eclipse 300 passing yards. Again, had the 3 interceptions in the first half, ran for 2 touchdowns. So obviously, I just was expecting this guy to, had earlier in the week kind of shown that passion towards the CFL rules. I don't know about you, Huss. I thought he was going to come out and throw the lights out. That certainly wasn't the case in this. However, a solid game, a solid win for BC, right? Because those West standings are now interesting. The Toronto Argonauts, they kind of reverted back to some of their old ways, Huss. I'm not saying they had established the run game in recent weeks, but look, Nick Arbuckle seemingly comes out of nowhere. He's going to play this game. That gives them, obviously a major boost on offense. We all saw what Jarrett Dagey couldn't do. But they relied on him too much. It's crazy to me. They had 30 rushing yards in that game. They relied on the quarterback way too much. Nick Arbuckle, who's had a great season, I thought it was really interesting to hear about his injury. Apparently he was coaching kids and was showing an example of a drill and was sprinting out right on it and realized, oh, right, I'm supposed to be hurt. And then they realized he could play. I heard that in-game story. I thought that was hilarious. But I just think a guy who's missed some action, who's proven to be a good quarterback this year, but it certainly isn't a great quarterback. To lean on him that heavily to be such a one-dimensional offense, while the Argos were able to keep it close, it was certainly on the backs of their defense, not on the play of their attack, regardless of how Arbuckle's played this year.
And listen, I mean, for obvious reasons, we focused on the BC offense and Nathan Rourke all season long because the defense, frankly, has stunk more often than not this year. But it is important to remember, and at this time of the season, especially as you get into the playoffs, you want to mask some weaknesses, but you also need big-time players to step up big. And Matthew Betts was that guy with the game-saving strip sack on Arbuckle to win the game. And he is a player, and there's not a ton of defensive players, I would say, in the Canadian Football League that are in the league that Betts is, that can completely turn a game around with his presence and a couple big plays. And they got it done. And listen, for BC, they took care of business. They got the win that they needed, and they threw the gauntlet down to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on Saturday afternoon as they took on the Hamilton Tiger Cats in what was certainly the closest game by the odds. Bombers were just a 1-point favorite, but they were getting Zach Collaros back. And you mentioned earlier about statement games. The statement that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers said was not so fast on writing us off for the rest of the season. Look what we can do when we get our quarterback back. Because as I was saying last week, I mean, as many jokes as there were made about the passing or lack thereof in the win over Ottawa, the other aspects of this football team continue to improve. Special teams and defense, a running game that is very, very difficult, even with 9 guys in the box to stop, and they found a way to win. You add in Zach Collaros, who joined the fray on the weekend and put together an absolutely vintage performance, and that combined with a bit of a no-show at times for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and you get a laugher to the tune of 40-3, which of course was kicked off right from the opening kickoff with Trey Vaval going to the house.
Yeah, you honestly can't start a game a better way than the Bombers did. As you mentioned, Trey Vaval, 98 yards. And, this kid is really making a name for himself. Obviously, you mentioned the Ottawa game. That was a game where he had a combined 199 yards off 2 missed field goals, including 128-yard return for a touchdown. That set a single-game record in the Canadian Football League. Earlier this year, he was the first Bombers player, I believe, to return a punt return touchdown and a kickoff return touchdown in the same game. This guy has just been doing such incredible things. So what a way to start off. And really, it set the tone the rest of the way. It got so bad for Hamilton Huss that they were like, by the start of the third quarter, the idea of going for field goals was no longer an option. So it was just desperate football. And you saw a Winnipeg defense who, under Jordan Younger now for their second season, they're not all about they obviously want to get pressure on the quarterback, but they prioritize rushing 3, having someone move back into the, to play more cover and really try to take the pass out of the game. Well, Hamilton Tiger Cats, they haven't been playing their best game. They certainly didn't play their best game on this day, had the second highest scoring offense, and really 3 weeks ago would have had the top scoring offense, right? This is a Hamilton Tiger Cats team that we've seen in the past start really slow, in some cases trail pretty by a healthy margin in the second half, and then Bo Levi Mitchell just keeps chucking it. I think the Bombers, some people even on the Bombers sideline, wondered when this Ticats offense would get going. I don't see another reason why you would keep in Brady Oliveira, Zach Collaros for as long as they did, because it was such a dominated game that you thought that, this game was put away, really heading into that fourth quarter. But just pure domination by Winnipeg. I looked back to this season, right? We've seen some dominating efforts from Winnipeg over this 5-year stretch of making the Grey Cups. Obviously, I look at a 2021 season, and it was just their margin of victory was like 2 touchdowns, their average margin of victory. And so we've seen some dominating performances here, but I went back to this season because I really couldn't think of, any effort like this, right? Obviously, the Bombers being 8-7, they're more of a middling team here, so there's fewer wins to look at. You can look at the beginning of the year with BC. Yeah, those are some pretty healthy victories, no doubt. I think both, I remember recalling both of those. Never them really seemed in danger, but they weren't the dominating presence that we saw this past week. And even that game against Montreal, they won by 13, 14 points. That was a 3-point game in the fourth quarter. This was a no-doubter really from the opening kickoff, but certainly through 3 quarters. And now the question is, what is this going to mean for Winnipeg? Right? Because, I mean, this, people are talking about the Bombers. Don't count them out right now. They're riding high. It's really just one game against the Ticats team that had been slipping for weeks here, right? That grip on first place in the East has never been looser for Hamilton this season. So what do you make of this game? Do you think this is the kind of game that you're looking at and seeing, okay, look at the offense clicking now. We're going to see the Bombers of old. What's your biggest takeaway from this game?
I am on a little bit of the other side on this, in that I think listen, the bottom line was, this is about the reemergence of a Bomber offense that can go toe-to-toe with anybody in the Canadian Football League. Because, to be honest, they have been carried by a defense that at the start of the year was in shambles. And the way that this defense has progressed from like week 4, 5, 6 to where we are right now is significant. And I will say this, I thought the defense played well enough to win both of the Saskatchewan games, to win the Hamilton game on the road, and they just simply were in a bit of an offensive funk. You had injuries, and then, the Ottawa game, as much as it was, the butt of a lot of jokes, the way they found a way to win, I think really resonated that football team, knowing that, you know what, if we can get Zach Collaros back, we are going to be a problem for somebody come playoff time. And, holding a team led by Bo Levi Mitchell to 3 points, I think speaks for itself. They're winning. I mean, you've got a great kicker in Sergio Castillo. The cover teams have been really well. And now Trey Vaval has just created a Janarian Grant-like threat that we haven't seen in a couple of years that makes a massive difference. And I would argue that, that was the biggest play of the game, spotting the Bombers, that lead. And, we talk about Chris Streveler's 3-1 record as a starter. I would suggest that Vaval's missed field goal return in the Ottawa game and his 2 returns in the Toronto game flipped both of those games in the favor of Winnipeg. Like, I'm not sure this is a playoff team if we don't have the special performances that he's given so far. So I'll tell you what, if Zach Collaros and this Bomber offense can look anything like they looked on Saturday afternoon going forward, the rest of the team has already raised its level to a playoff standard and caliber. And I'm really interested to see what happens in these final 3 weeks, where the dust settles with the playoffs, and what this team might do in a very different situation than they have found themselves in the last number of years, with home field advantage and in all likely playing at home, when that probably won't be the case, at least unless they get to the Grey Cup. Couple guys I want to single out here. Brady Oliveira continues to, and again, we talk about, it's really the passing offense because the rushing offense has been there. The offensive line's trending in a positive direction. Brady went for about 150 combined. And then on the defensive, I mean, Dietrich Nichols in particular, the job, like Kenny Lawler was targeted 9 times in that football game by Bo Levi Mitchell and had 2 catches. And by the way, you mentioned their penchant for going for it. I think we learned everything we needed to know about how dire the Ticats felt that situation was when we weren't even into the second half. It was the end of the second quarter, and they had what would have been an easy 3 points, which would have got them to 19-6, and they decided to go for it. The Bombers stopped them and then never turned back, and they really didn't threaten at all in the second half of that football game. So if you were waiting or looking for a reason to believe in the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, I think quietly the defense has been getting to where they need to be. The offense was where they need to be. And talking to a lot of Bomber fans who are, let's just say, a lot more excited about their prospects than they were 2-3 weeks, a month ago because of the struggles that they've had. But it's not where you start, it's how you finish. And I will say that game was, if that's any indication of what we're going to see from the Bombers in these next 3 weeks, we'll see if that happens. This team will be a tough out for anybody come playoff time.
You think about Zach Collaros, right? Lots of talk about him, head injury, whether he should play or not. What's he gonna like? What's it gonna be like when he comes back? When does he come back? Well, what a game he had, right? Season high, 367 passing yards, I believe it was. I think he only had one passing touchdown, if I'm correct.
Yeah, because Strebler had three on the ground. It was basically exactly the same as Davis Alexander.
Exactly. So there's that. I think what a really underrated return was Jarrett Stearns. He's a guy that Zach singled out personally during the practice week after the game. He just does so much, right? He's that guy who just is like that swing option. He's always just where he needs to be, and he's reliable, right? For a first-year player on this team, I know that this club thinks very highly of them. The other one, Haas, you mentioned them, Kenny Lawler, right? It was Dexter Lawson. He tested him twice in the end zone. There was that Nichols, as you mentioned. There was Demario Houston broke up a couple passes. Like, Kenny got borderline beat up in that game. Like it felt kind of personal. And I know he referenced there was a play particularly close to the end zone. It might have been in the end zone. I don't think it was in the end zone, but I think it was very close to the end zone, near where the press box was. He referenced after the game that he hit his head. I believe it was on that play. He got up pretty slowly after that one. It looked like he hit his head when he, went to go catch the ball and contacted the field, as we often see kind of the head throw back there. So I hope he's doing okay. But I do think, it almost felt borderline trolling Huss with Dylan Mitchell. Right, because Dylan Mitchell, as we know, has had a heck of a time getting into the game, onto the roster after showing up, out of shape or whatever. Had kind of worked and this isn't a bad dude, right? He's not a lippy guy or whatever, so I don't know what played into the offseason stuff, right? Like just put his head down, continue to do his business. Is getting ready for this game, Huss. And 2 weeks, not this game, but 2 weeks ago, I think Taylor, my colleague Taylor Allen was in Hamilton for the Winnipeg game. Kenny had no problem shooting darts at the Winnipeg organization, had no problem, talking about his new home and how great it was. And certainly seemingly out of nowhere, names Dylan Mitchell. As a guy like they picked Dylan Mitchell over me. Well, Dylan Mitchell, I don't want to say got the last laugh because I don't think Dylan Mitchell came into this game thinking that he had to outperform Kenny Lawler, but that didn't mean he didn't. And what a performance Dylan Mitchell had, and what I think Bomber fans and certainly teammates and the team as a whole are hoping is more to come for him.
Yeah, he caught all three of his targets. That beautiful throw from Zach into the end zone for the touchdown in the first half, and Ontario Wilson was productive. Stearns had a couple catches. Brady had 53 in the air, and old faithful Nick Dembski started a new streak after having it broken at 84 games in Ottawa. 7 catches on all 7 targets, and gets to 114. So big win for the Bombers. They keep pace with BC, or technically stay ahead of them because of the tiebreaker, and now Montreal just 1 game behind Hamilton at the top of the East. But again, Hamilton does have that tiebreaker. The final game, probably certainly the most exciting game at the end. And, we'll get to the heavy hearts in Edmonton over the passing of Larry Thompson in a minute. But Cody Fajardo and the Elks, no quit, although no quit in the Riders. They came back with a pretty big-time rally. A quintessential CFL fourth quarter with 32 points scored, and it came down to an unsuccessful 2-pointer, but the Elks get a win to sort of keep their faint playoff hopes alive, and the Riders get another one in the loss column.
So we were talking off mic here before we started the show, and I was just kind of like over the CFL after the third quarter. I was just like, this game is snail's pace. It's like I turned it off. And it wasn't until later that day that I opened up to check what the final score was. I kind of assumed Riders would win that one. I just felt like it was just, maybe they come back. The Elks were kind of holding on to it, whatever. And then sure enough, it's 27-25 for Edmonton, and I see 32 points scored in the fourth quarter. They combined for 20 through the first 3. And to score multiple touchdowns on each side, like it doesn't make much sense, Huss. But once the smoke settled, like what a game, what an ending, it had very much like that. Well, not exactly like Labor Day, but certainly a crazy wild finish in that it went down to the wire. And so, I mean, I just what an impressive performance. The numbers are so skewed with the final numbers, right? Because all that action happened in the fourth quarter. So you have Cody Fajardo eclipsing 300 passing yards. You have Justin Rankin, who looks like he had just an absolute incredibly standout game. Up until that point, they could barely get the run game going. He, of course, runs for a pair of touchdowns in that fourth quarter, including a 37-yarder and what I think was like an 80-something yard day, right? That just shows you just how much damage was done in the fourth quarter. Luckily for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, they still have a healthy lead in first place in the West, but this was a massive win for Edmonton. They're still very, very, very much behind in the race. They got a lot of work to get done, but this would have been, that final strike to their season, and to hold on the way they did and to do so, Huss, after their last two games and in the fashions in which they couldn't get it done. Could you imagine? They were talking about that leading up to kickoff in this one, how much the heartache had gotten to them from such close games and not finding themselves on the right side. To do it the way they did it in this game against the opponent they were up against and the circumstances that they were under, given what had happened, as you mentioned, to their owner that week. I thought it was just an incredible game for Edmonton, and kudos for them for delivering the 2 points.
So after all the games, this is how things are shaping up right now. The Riders still in control of the West. They've got 10 wins on the season. A couple losses in a row, though, brought them to 10-4. But Calgary hasn't been winning during this time as well. They fall to 8-6, a half game up on the 8-7 Bombers and Lions. Again, Bombers have third place based on their tiebreaker, and Edmonton still hanging around with the faint hope, must win against the Bombers after the bye week. Edmonton at 6-9, and then in the East, it's Hamilton at 9-6, Montreal at 8-7. And then the 5-10 Argos and the 4-10 Ottawa Redblacks. Jeff, as we move on to everything else going on around the league, it was a very sad announcement that not even a year after taking over the Edmonton Elks franchise, Larry Thompson passed away. And, we talked a little bit about this on WST this week. And, of course, Dustin Nielsen, who calls CFL games for TSN, my partner in the lock shop, telling us a story of the day that he was introduced at the owner, and the EST guys were down there broadcasting on location, and they sort of wrangled him in to talk to him before it all started. And, Larry was talking about how excited he was and how much he loves the team. And Dusty told a story of how, they were in Commonwealth at that point, and he sort of goes, guys, look over. You see that seat right there in that row? That's my seat. I've been there for however many years. I mean, dating back, I believe, to the 70s. Since he'd been cheering that team on. And it was such a cool story for a guy that lived this league and team as a fan, kind of coming to the rescue when they needed it the most. And I think by any measure, this has been a very positive season for the Elks. Even if they don't make the playoffs, they seem to have a quarterback that can win games. They're trending in the right direction. They're winning. And they're putting more asses in seats as well. Very nice crowd for the Saskatchewan game, approaching 30 grand on the weekend. So a big loss for Edmonton in particular and the Canadian Football League. But it sounds like his legacy is going to continue with the club.
Yeah, obviously a difficult week, right? And I mean, it's not that there's ever perfect timing for this stuff, obviously, but it just felt like, the CFL changes were so raw for a lot of CFL fans. And then it was just 2 days later or whatever, you get this, as we often do, these messages over social media. And you're just kind of I remember reading that and being like, is this like a joke? Obviously no one's joking about these things, but I just thought to myself, oh man, I felt so bad for the organizations. I felt so bad for the management, right down to the players. CFL teams are their businesses. There's no doubt about it. They're businesses. They're there with the goal of trying to turn a profit and really running businesses, right? But there's but there's the people within those businesses. And, all accounts, when it came to Larry Thompson and his leadership and his role as an owner, to your point, to your story, was very much driven by passion, driven by wanting to see an organization that had, let's face it, had certainly struggled in recent years here, get back to its glory days. I think that's really the unfortunate part. One of the biggest unfortunate parts in all this is that, Mr. Thompson won't be able to see, what he started. The good news, and you kind of alluded to it, was that it from the sounds of his wife, Deb, they're going to continue on his legacy and run the team. Often, there's it wouldn't be, it's not unprecedented for situations like this to happen. An owner, to really be the one driving the wheel behind, the business ventures, and then a death happens, and then all of a sudden it's handed down to a different family member, immediate family member, and then those questions of what the future are like for that organization while mourning the death of somebody. They are certainly in the air. Well, those got put to rest right away, as far as they will be going and handling this, moving with the team forward. And I think that's, obviously great news for the Elks, but, I think it's great news for of course, Mr. Thompson's legacy and what they have started there, because if this year is indicative of anything, it is indicative of progress and getting, back to where they once were and maybe even better. So certainly started with Mr. Thompson. It's going to continue on with his family. And, I just have condolences for the entire Elks organization and, from everybody involved, and including the fans. So,
yeah, well said. I mean, I'll back that up with, our thoughts here from the Winnipeg Sports Talk side of things. And you wish them and the franchise and that's one of the jewels of the Canadian Football League, and it just got run into the ground by Chris Jones. And it was Larry Thompson who loved that team so much that he was the one that stepped in with his own money that he earned in the construction business to save it in a lot of ways. And I mean, you hope that will continue, because certainly that is very important for the Canadian Football League to get the Edmonton market back to where it should be. And that's with the Winnipegs and Saskatchewans as some of the model franchises around. God knows we've been talking about it daily on WST and social media still, but fallout from the announcements of last week. By the way, we will have our interview that we did on Winnipeg Sports Talk with Stewart Johnston at the end after we do our picks, so you can stick around and see that. And I knew that there was going to be some hot takes and there would be some loud people that were really against this. I spent a lot of time talking to people at the game, the Saturday game of Winnipeg and Hamilton, just asking, Bomber fans that I knew that have been there for many, many years about what they've thought. And I shouldn't be surprised. It was some sort of a mixed bag. I mean, there were some people that said it's BS and, the field shouldn't change. And then there were some others that said, actually, I kind of thought about this beforehand, and I'm excited to see how this looks. You're never going to have a consensus right out of the gate on something like this. And usually, in most cases, people that are angry or on the other side of things, you might hear a little bit more of them. But I know you've had a lot of conversations over the past week. What have you learned from those?
My biggest takeaway, and it's not, when it comes to the fallout of these rule changes, it's not so, it's pretty obvious, and it's not, I'm not bringing any crazy revelations from this, but it really does depend on where you live in this country. Because, living in Winnipeg, obviously, especially at a time where the Bombers are flying as high as they are, they've never made more money, in their entire existence, right? It's just been a success at the box office and the bottom line for this team. So everybody here, and they're not naive to other markets. They're not naive to the struggles in Toronto. They hear about it all the time, right? They hear about attendance issues in other places. They hear about how teams aren't doing as well. They talk about, they understand that other markets aren't turning the kind of profit that exists in Winnipeg, but they just don't really care. They go, well, why not? Are they doing what, Winnipeg's doing? Look what Winnipeg's doing. Look at the effort they put in. Are they, are essentially, are they doing as much as they possibly can to max out their market? And I think it's, it's no, right? Like to a lot of these people, especially my email inbox, it's, whether you want to call it the vocal majority, minority, most of the people who have sent me emails, and we're getting into the dozens here, Huss, is negative, right? And it's because of those exact things I said. They see it flourishing here, and they want to see that in all 9 markets across the CFL. And if only they could get to those 9 markets, if only they could do better marketing, if they could only do, invest more in, get the players out here. All these ideas come up whenever these challenges or whenever the changes to the game are even suggested, let alone implemented. So now that they've been implemented here, Huss, it felt really raw. Now, is that going to, ease up here as time goes on? Yeah, I think so. But I think people are going to be reminded by next year when the rules change. Then certainly by 2027, it's going to be another reminder. So I'm not surprised by the fallout. I do think, again, depending on where you live in the country, depending on what your values are for the CFL, you're going to have differing opinions. I've just put it right here. I know I've been critical of the messaging of the league. I do think it is a form of Americanization. I don't know how you can possibly argue against that. It makes the league become more accessible to U.S. audiences, to U.S. markets more than ever before. That alone suggests that. However, I do really think that we need to take a wait and see approach here. Now, I'm not saying that in the context of stop being angry and stop emailing people and telling them you don't. I think you should be emailing and signing every petition that you want because you need your voice heard, not because the rule changes are going to all of a sudden be pulled out and Stewart Johnston's going to come and say, sorry, guys, I realized that what we did in this grandiose press conference wasn't the right avenue, wasn't the right path. I've decided we're not going to go, the way the 9 team presidents and owners want to go. That's not going to happen. But what will happen is the next time, whether that be in 2027, 2028, or after, the next time they decide to make drastic changes to your game, all the things that we're hearing about today that still exist, that still make it a Canadian game, it is that pressure that you apply to the league now that is going to be remembered the next time they do another press conference like this, the next time they do a talking tour that Stewart Johnston did. Right now, what data he's collecting. Now what he's capable of. And so I'm glad people's voices are being heard. It's not going to change much, but I do think we take a wait and see approach here because there's still many elements that make this game Canadian. Let's try to keep it that way, but let's take a wait and see approach, in my opinion, to these changes.
Yeah, and of course, stick around at the end of CFL 110 after we make our picks. You will hear from the commissioner from his interview with us on WST last week. We did have a trade in the Canadian Football League. That doesn't happen too often. We're still, I guess the deadline's coming up very quickly. We'll see if there's any other movement. But Calgary fortifying a bit of the defense at the expense of the Ottawa Redblacks for only the cost of a 4th-round pick.
Which is interesting to me. So it's a great pickup. For Calgary, right? Foreign Omalade is out. He's out for the year after the Achilles. So Jalen Hutchins just got back. They've had some injuries on their defensive line, and that was their bread and butter of their number one defense, right? Getting that pressure on quarterbacks. And so picking up a guy like Lorenzo Malden, yes, he's 32 next month, or 33, I believe, next month. But he's a guy who's not far removed. 2022 was CFL's Defensive Player of the Year. He can, he's a veteran guy. He brings some stability back to that line. So the trade's great. What the other big takeaway, of course, in this, Huss, is Ottawa dumping players. Like, is Ottawa, are they recognizing that they're 4-10, that they have a massive, hill in front of them to make the playoffs, and are they already looking towards 2026? Obviously. Now the question then becomes, is anybody else possible or up for grabs? Is anybody else potentially being taken? And I think about that, Huss, because I think about a team just a little bit west to us over in Regina who's currently looking at a kicker who's got 68% success rate and our first place in the West Division. We've been talking about this all the time. Could a Lewis Ward from Ottawa potentially be in play here? Would other players from Ottawa be available? I don't think it's going to be a mass departure. That's not how CFL teams work. A lot of players don't like to just up and leave. I even bet Lorenzo Malden probably got a bit of a, like, hey, were you interested in this? Is this something you're good with, right? Because although it's professional sports, it's not as comfortable for a player, especially if they have family, kids, those kind of things, to just up and leave for a couple months, right? Again, it is business, and it would be completely within Red Blacks general manager Sean Burke's role and allowance here to trade him. But in the CFL, there is, like you mentioned, there isn't a lot of trades, and therefore the conversation's a little bit more so than maybe other leagues. But what could this mean? And if you're Saskatchewan, are you thinking about getting a Lewis Ward? Like, have you seen enough? Brett Lothar didn't have a great performance this last game, so where are we at?
It is a great question. That has to be something that the Riders are thinking about. And, it's funny. My partner on Winnipeg Sports Talk and the producer of CFL 110, Michael Remus, did bring up to me on our text chat after this trade was made that maybe a guy like Dustin Crum might be available to come in for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and be a more legitimate backup threat than Chris Streveler has shown so far this season. Now,
I don't think there's an interest to get rid of Dustin Crum in Ottawa. The way they were talking about him when I was down there, not saying he was going to, supplant Drew Brown anytime soon, but I don't think they're looking to get rid of him to give, to give another team an option to have that kind of quarterback depth. So it's an interesting suggestion. We'll see if that's even a possibility.
The deadline is 3:59 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. So certainly on next week's CFL 110 and on Thursday's edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk, we'll have the latest on any deals coming out of the CFL trade deadline. One other quick note, and this to me is a good news story for the CFL. We knew the World Cup was going to impact the Argos and the Lions. The Argos took the easy way out and a way that I think does a disservice to their franchise in just simply playing home games on the road in places where they'll get butts in the seats. Hamilton, Winnipeg, and Saskatchewan. I knew Omar Doman wouldn't go down that road, and they're looking at this as an opportunity to expose more British Columbians to the BC Lions and moving HQ out to Kelowna for a couple of weeks for 2 games next season.
Yeah, pretty beautiful backup location, eh? Not a horrible place to put on a football game. And from what we understand, like, it's, I believe, have they put in a game? Did they not put a game out there not too long ago in Kamloops?
It was Victoria.
The story was Victoria, correct, right? But they looked at Victoria and they saw the blueprint to be close. This isn't going to be a 30,000 fan stadium. This is going to be, they're going to put this is the efforts, I imagine. Well, not imagine, I know Toronto fans wish that they were doing, right? Their organization was doing, because this takes time, it takes logistics, it takes resources, it takes money, right? But all of that to appease your fan base, right? And we know that while, Amar Doman's done some amazing things in BC, it's not like he's just, making rich from an increase in ticket sales. A lot of the average attendance is, their average attendance and numbers they have are boosted from a couple games. We don't need to get into all the concerts and all the whatever that's led to higher than normal attendance. That's not my point. My point is he's still coming up with ways, like, he hasn't created this like momentum that people are filling BC Place and he's riding that momentum. He's understanding how important it is to get the product out in his province, to show the province that he cares with his money, with his ideas, with the creativity that the Lions have brought, not just in this example, but in other examples, whether it's their media team, whatever. They certainly are a team that's investing in their product, wants to grow their audience, and this to me is just another example of that. It is a great news story. Of course, when you're hosting something as prestigious as the World Cup, that's going to take precedent. It needs to take precedent. There's going to be a lot of great things that come to that city. For them to have a backup plan, the work that it takes, right? Because it's the work that it takes to fill their own venue for these events. Now it's the added work that is so much less than saying, let's go over to, let's make it, as Toronto's doing, let's Let's go make Winnipeg, one of our home games. Let's go make Saskatchewan one of our home games where tens of thousands of fans are going to show up, and you're just really putting your own team at a disadvantage, right? That's exactly what Toronto's doing. So to see pretty much the exact opposite over in that, not surprising, but certainly a thumbs up to the BC Lions organization and their ability to come together and create a plan B that I think is sitting much better with their fan base than what we're seeing in Toronto.
Definitely. All right. Again, we've got the Stewart Johnston interview coming up in just a minute. First things first, though, let's get to our lines over at coolbet.com. Shout out to our friends at Coolbet. And if you haven't played at Coolbet before, use the promo code WST for a 100% bonus on your first deposit up to $200. Shout out to everyone that tweeted along that they rode the CFL 110 parlay, which cashed last week. A little while since a 4-0 week. Don't mind saying that. Was very nicely done. So let's get to it, Jeff. We open up on Friday in Ottawa. The Rough Riders coming off 2 consecutive losses to take on the Red Blacks, who are pretty much done. The Riders are 3.5-point favorites in Ottawa. Where are you at on this one?
Two. You know what? I was looking at this and thinking to myself, okay, you have the Riders who are going to be pissy, no doubt about it, losing to Edmonton after having their bye week. So they come in, it's another road game, right? But then I start looking over at Ottawa and I see a team that just traded one of their best edge rushers, right? So that's a loss. But no, they need to win, right? Like, it's just that thing where it's like, I was expecting the Saskatchewan Rough Riders to go into Edmonton this week and beat the bricks off them, right? I mean, they knew what was at stake here. They understand the situation of the standings. I just think they get it done this week, and so I'm going to go with Saskatchewan.
I'm with you too.
I don't love the 3.5, but what is it that Ottawa's done that suggested anything dominant? And while they will be playing desperate, I give myself a news flash here. They've been playing desperate all season long. So I'm with the Riders, 3.5 points.
Yeah, listen, they'll be playing for their coaches. But, I mean, you would have expected them to do that against Winnipeg, and they lost a couple weeks ago to a game that has been discussed ad nauseum here. So, yeah, 3.5 for the Riders on the road. I think Corey Mace cracks the whip and lets his players know that, what has happened, giving up 48 at home to Montreal. Obviously what happened in Edmonton on the weekend, not good enough right now. And they need to get back to the way they looked running out to that 10-2 record to, first of all, lock down the West and have the road to Winnipeg go through Regina in the playoffs. So we're both on Saskatchewan. Really interesting one here. Battle of Ontario. Ticats coming off just an absolute ass-kicking in Winnipeg, taking on the Toronto Argonauts, who always seem to be in these games. This is a really tight one. We all remember the thriller between these teams on the Monday of the Labor Day weekend. The Argos are at home. They are a 1.5-point favorite, even money on the money line. Ticats -1.5 and -120. Do the Ticats get one back on Nick Arbuckle and the Argos, or do the Argos keep their faint playoff hopes alive with a big win against their biggest rival?
I'm going with the over.
Yes, which is 57.5.
Is it 57? I didn't know what it was.
The biggest one of the year.
For sure. It's up there 100%. I think the last biggest one was when these two teams played, and I don't know if they lived up to the expectation. What did you say the odds were again? Sorry, 1.5.
It's 1.5 for Hamilton on the road.
For Hamilton. Okay, that's what I thought you said. I don't like. This one is weird to me. This one is kind of one I wish was in I wish was in Toronto a little bit.
It is in Toronto.
Sorry, my mistake. Wish was in Hamilton because of the extra points, right? Like, I wish Toronto was going to Hamilton, because then the spread would probably be around 4.5, 5 points in favor of Hamilton. And I really, really would take the Argos. Like, I think it's going to be a close game. I think they're smart on this one. It's almost too close for me.
It's a pick 'em, basically.
It's a pick 'em, but like, this is the thing. Like, I think Hamilton's a better team. Have they been playing like a better team than Toronto of late? Not really. They both kind of been playing the same. They both not been able to get those victories. I just think something's got to give in Hamilton. So because it's at home, because, they've lost through, because they got dominated, I think they're going to be on their P's and Q's. They're going to be focused because their grip on first place is all of a sudden in real danger here with Montreal now winning 3 games in a row. All we're asking for them is to beat the 5-10 Argos by 2 points. It might not be easy, Huss, but I'm going to say Hamilton does it.
Yeah, this is such a difficult pick. And to be honest, I think maybe more of a stay away at least, or this would be my third of 3 picks. To me, it's such a toss up. I could make an argument for the Toronto Argonauts. I mean, they certainly pulled off a special win when these teams played earlier on. And, they've done, like, their record is one thing. The record against the spread is another thing entirely. I mean, the last 2 games, they've found ways. You know what they say? Good teams win, great teams cover. They've been great at doing that. But again, we're talking about a bit of a ping. I'll roll with you with this one on the Ticats. Just, you have to see some sort of a response after the embarrassment that happened for them at the hands of the Bombers on Saturday afternoon.
And this is one of those games where I talk about personality. I know I always talk about personality in these games. This to me is one of those, like, look, the biggest issue for Hamilton in this game is going to be beating an Argos defense that is decent, right? That's really what it comes down to. Are we, is Arbuckle in the offense good? Yeah, they're pretty good. They got weapons. They don't have a run game, so they're really one-dimensional, but they're lucky they have weapons. I don't think that the Toronto offense is going to be so amazing under Nick Arbuckle, but the reality is if Bo Levi Mitchell can find his groove against this defense, get some points early, really work them, and we know that he can. We know that he's been able to put up points against them. That's going to be the difference to me. It's all going to be how Hamilton not necessarily starts, and if they're not leading by the end of the first quarter, they're in major trouble, but Bo Levi Mitchell needs to get the ball moving against that Toronto defense. Wynton McManus and that group is a very, very, very good group. The record doesn't show it, but that is a good unit. And much like Winnipeg's recipe in beating Hamilton was that defensive effort, keeping Bo and offense off the field like everyone's plan is. Toronto's another defense that I think is capable of it. But we're talking 1.5 points. We're not talking 3.5 points or 4 or 5.5 points. We're talking 1.5 points. And for that reason, I'm thinking, it might not be a convincing victory. I think Hamilton is going to end up on the right side of things this week.
Yeah, and again, it's -110 if you lay the 1.5 points. It's -120 just to win the game. And it wouldn't at all surprise me if this comes down to a 1-point game. I mean, if history tells us anything, these teams have some thrillers. So if we're aligned, maybe we just throw Ticats money line on the parlay as opposed to even worrying about the extra point. Final game, certainly for those of us in the West, the biggest game of the week. It's Calgary at 8-6, going into BC at 8-7. The Lions are 3.5-point favorites in this game. I'll lead this one off, Hammer. I mean, we saw these teams go at it a couple weeks ago in Calgary, and it was an emergence of Nathan Rourke reminding everybody who the best quarterback in the league is. Calgary is struggling right now. I mean, Vernon Adams did return to the lineup on the weekend. They had absolutely no answers for the Montreal Alouettes. And to be honest, I think that the scare or listen, the game that Nathan Rourke had with the 3 picks, I think is going to make him even more prepared and better for the game on the weekend. I mean, to me, BC has been up and down, and they're not a team that you can really trust. But I think we're seeing at what's happening in Calgary, and I do expect a much better Nathan Rourke, and to me, that's enough to back the Lions at -3.5.
Yeah, well, it was only Huss. We talk about this game, BC's game against Toronto this last week. It was only a week before that they laid a 50 burger on Calgary and it beat them 52-23, right? So they've already shown that they can dominate this defense. Now, what does a trade this week do for them? We'll see, right? We'll figure it out. They haven't been able to get that pressure onto the quarterback. They're going to want to get that and more against Nathan Rourke. And given the way the BC Lions defense is playing right now, that's a pretty interesting lineup, and one that seems to favor heavily on the BC Lions. However, we're talking about Vernon Adams Jr. returning to Vancouver, right? And it's not just Vernon Adams Jr. returning to the team where he was done dirty last year with Nathan Rourke signing and divided the locker room. And ultimately, while there were other things at play, was probably the biggest disturber to their season and ultimately led to an early exit. This is the big thing here. It's not even about playing his former team. It's being inside. It's being indoors for Vernon Adams. This is the difference to me, and I've been holding my breath on this. I maybe mentioned it last week for CFL 110, but I believe I've been holding on to this because I just don't think Vernon Adams plays well in the fall. Like I think he's not an outside guy. And when he was having all that success, he was playing in the comfortable confines of BC Place, where the worst case scenario of weather was when you open the roof. Right, like to a big sunny dome, right? It's almost like heavenly when those circumstances play. So I think he's going to be playing one of his best games in recent time here because he's going to be in the comfortable confines of an indoor facility where I just don't think that like the pressure necessarily I think the weather is such a major factor on Vernon Adams' play. And I'm not talking weather like has to be a rainstorm or like super chilly temperatures. I think outside wind, fall kind of temperatures is enough for Vernon Adams to throw him off his game. So I'm going to go with the Stamps in this one. I am going to ride with VA. Am I comfortable? Am I confident? Absolutely not. Not, especially the way that Vernon Adams has played, the injuries he suffered over the last, few weeks. But I think he's going to take this one, make this one personal, and take the anger and turn it into maybe a victory, but no more, Huss, than a 3.5 point.
Listen, I'm with you about the storyline. I'm here for it. But I don't think it's going to be enough. I mean, Nathan Rourke, listen, if he plays like he played last weekend, okay, maybe we've got a game. But I don't know what Vernon Adams would need to do to keep up with that BC Lions offense on the fast track inside the dome after they just put up the numbers that they did in their most recent meeting in the first one of two. And if there's one thing, and again, I don't know whether you can really apply this to this game in particular, but it's not lost upon me that, in the West this year, like we're not seeing a lot of splits in these season series. Winnipeg has owned BC. Calgary has owned Winnipeg and owned Saskatchewan. And now BC's got the one, and I think they do it again. So we'll be on the opposite sides. We'll negotiate for that final play, and we will have a CFL 110 parlay up. Hopefully we can go back to back. Of course, that will be up over at coolbet.com. And again, Jeff, just before we turn it over to the Stewart Johnston interview, as I mentioned, I'm not sure if we expect a ton of activity, but the CFL trade deadline is 3:59 Eastern on Wednesday. So expect some news to come out of that. And then the rosters are set, and it is a sprint to the finish line in what is a very, very interesting season. I can't remember a CFL year that I think is going to have more intriguing and impactful matchups in the final 3 weeks of the season than this year right now, because no one's really home and cooled.
Well, man, it was only like a couple of weeks ago we were talking about the most exciting race was the bottom of the divisions. Well, now all of a sudden the top of the divisions are at play, right? At least they're not mathematically eliminated. By next week, I imagine just simple math will stop talking, not get rid of them, but stop talking about their playoff aspirations. Toronto, Ottawa, right? As we look at that magic number, they can only get to 8 wins, some of those teams, right? So right now, Winnipeg, obviously BC, all sitting, in Calgary and Saskatchewan, all more than 8 wins. So there is going to be some standings, figuring out some standings here in the next few weeks. But I'm with you, man. I think these are going to be wild games. Teams aren't just going to quit. There's going to be teams that are going to want to be spoilers, and I think this is going to be an absolutely incredible final 5 or so weeks here, because we won't have a team necessarily that will be able to just sit and rest. All the teams that are at the top are losing games. The teams at the bottom are winning games. Something needs to give. Let's all see how it plays out. And more importantly, let's all break it down when it does. Another fun week of CFL.
By my math, the winner of Calgary, BC clinches a playoff spot. They'll get to 9 wins. And Here are your futures right now. Just a little update before we finish up here. To win the Grey Cup, Coolbet still has the Hamilton Tiger Cats as the favorite at plus 250, mostly based on the fact that they had the inside track on winning the East, which would mean a home game for a trip to Winnipeg. Saskatchewan, first place in the West, is next at plus 275. I think that number is a little bit higher just because of the quality of teams in the West that they'll have to beat, assuming they have that home game. The Alouettes dropped to plus 350 after the return of Davis Alexander. The Stamps still right in the mix at plus 450. BC plus 550. And the Bombers only moved from 15-1 to 12-1 in the Grey Cup odds after their beatdown of the Ticats. The 6 teams that are most likely to miss the playoffs, 3 teams, have the biggest odds. Toronto 25-1, Edmonton 60-1, and Ottawa 100-1. Keep your eyes on the Coolbet combo cards. We'll put together our CFL 110 parlay and get that up. It will have the Riders, it will have the Ticats, and we'll negotiate as to whether we're going to roll with the BC pick or the Calgary pick. But you can check that up there. And of course, every week you can make your own. And one bet a week, use the 30% profit boost to kind of give yourself your own boost, not based on our picks, but your favorite ones as well. Hammer, great stuff as always. Going to be a fun weekend, and then we're back at it. Winnipeg going to Edmonton next week. Both teams coming off the bye, but 3 very important games for the top teams in the league this week in the Canadian Football League. Folks, thanks for being with us on CFL 110. And because of the holiday Tuesday, we've got an extended show. If you missed our conversation with CFL Commissioner Stewart Johnston after the press conference on Winnipeg Sports Talk, we've got that for you right now to finish up today's episode of CFL 110. Thanks for being with us. Thanks to our partners at Coolbet, and we'll see you next week right here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. All right, you've been waiting for this one, folks. Let's welcome in the Commissioner of the Canadian Football League, Stewart Johnston, to Winnipeg Sports Talk. Stewart, thanks so much for doing this. How's the week been? Pretty quiet around the CFL offices?
Not a lot going on. Just a quiet week. Yeah, it's been very interesting. Lots of attention, lots of reaction. And we're seeing and hearing and listening to all of it, and I'm happy to go on shows like this to kind of further discuss what was brought out on Monday.
Well, I can tell you this has been some of the most passionate CFL discussions we've had here in Winnipeg, a CFL mainstay city, and it just goes to show how much people do care about the Canadian Football League, if anyone was thinking otherwise.
I couldn't agree more. If there was ever a doubt in anyone's mind, I hope this week has erased it. There certainly was no doubt in ours. We know the passion of our fans, and I appreciate that passion. That is what drives our league, and that's why I hope if we've seen a lot of support, a lot of people understand what it is we're trying to achieve, and then there's folks who don't have a good opinion of it or have some questions and doubts, and I'm happy to come on shows like this and discuss it further.
Listen, you're very early in your term. These are big changes. Was this part of the plan right from the get-go that, coming on, you had a mandate to move this league forward, and you felt that these needed to be made, or was there more people kind of as part of this group that decided that this is the way the Canadian Football League will be best served moving forward?
Well, I think that my mandate was don't accept status quo just as is. Review, examine, and see how we can push our league forward. How do we take our great game, this incredible sport called Canadian football, and grow it? We need to grow, we need to grow fandom. We need to grow the business metrics. We need to have profitable teams, and we want to solidify our place at the top of the North American professional sports echelon. And that's our goal. And this was a group effort analyzing one step. And I want to emphasize it is one step. Now, we're not looking at any other rule changes. So please, there's nothing else from a rules perspective, but we want to look at everything, how we drive the business forward.
Well, I think there is definitely a conversation to be had on what has made a team like the Bombers so successful over the past 10 years and how that can be replicated otherwise in other areas that have been more struggling in comparison. But the genesis of these ideas. I mean, the way I read it, some don't, is that this is to make the game better, to make it more entertaining. If you can, I mean, just take us back to starting off, what you were looking for and how you and the group came to the announcements that we heard on Monday that will significantly change the game in the next couple of years.
Sure. The catalyst was really the goalposts. That was it. It is we looked at the data. 80% of all attempts going into the end zone are to the sides. And it's no wonder we have a massive obstruction across the middle of what I would call one of the most important areas of our field. And so we started doing some analysis on, well, if that was moved to the back, what would be the impact on our game? We know obviously 15 yards back or 20 would be a significant impact on the kicking game. But we did, when we took the analysis forward, all our data points to 10% more completions in the end zone, 60 total touchdowns or more per season, and an exciting brand of football where quarterbacks and game planners can use that entire field without worry. Defenders don't have to worry about getting picked off by a big immovable metal object, and offenses where starting deep in their own end actually can use their entire playbook and the entire field instead of being pinned to the short side. So it was wow, we can increase touchdowns, perhaps at the expense of some field goals. That's a trade I'm willing to make in a world where we're trying to drive entertainment. And then we take out collisions, we take out picks, and we take out that restricted playbook for when you're starting deep in your own end.
I like many people and many of our listeners have loved and been going to CFL games my entire life, and certainly consider myself someone that would be, would champion the league in football conversations. But I also love all football. I mean, I'll be watching the NFL on Sunday, and I'll be checking out what the Manitoba Bisons are doing, and even paying attention to the local high school. And it is, I mean, to me, it's never an either or. But there are people that feel that, particularly the goalposts and shrinking the field to 100 yards is taking the Canadian Football League closer to the standard of the National Football League, which, of course, is the powerhouse of all professional sporting leagues. I mean, well, what's your counter to people that, are worried that this is a step towards just taking the Canadian Football League and making it NFL-like?
I understand. I understand that reaction when people start putting pieces together and projecting forward. I get the fear. Because as a CFL fan, my whole life, I've had to defend the CFL in many conversations with folks who maybe say, "Hey, the NFL is the only great league," and I've been the defender of the CFL for my whole life. And I think a lot of the people are projecting that have that scar tissue like I do, because we've been such staunch defenders of our league. Now, like you, I of course I love all forms of football. I love U Sport, I love NFL, I love NCAA, and most of all, I love our game. I guess what I would say is this: there was not a single thought that these changes were about an Americanization or drifting closer to that game. This was, I gave all the reasons for the goalpost. Those were the reasons, and the shrinking of the field really comes up to this: it's keeping field goals in the game, and I think almost getting us back to where we are now. If a team starts a drive in their own end, they are now only 5 yards further away from field goal position than they are currently, because the goalpost went back 15 and we took 10 out. That was it. That's it. For me, Canadian football is about 3 downs, 12 players, 65 yards, motion, yard off, the Canadian ratio. These are the key elements of our Canadian game. And we truly believe all we will accomplish here is to expose it in an even greater way.
I have to give you and your team credit. I mean, the conference was presented in a very professional way, and as someone that was going into it with an open mind, I appreciated the data that you guys put together and the displays. When we're talking about moving, like you also brought up a bunch of the analytics, like when we're talking about moving the goalpost and what that does in the end zone. I'm wondering, with moving the field goal post to the back of the end zone, them being 15 yards and a 100-yard field, was there data at all about what happens in the middle of the field in traditional field goal kicking territory right now in the CFL? And do we expect to see more teams go for it on third down, or is it sort of a wash and we might just see some punts in those areas? Or was that really even dove into?
It was absolutely key focus. And that's the hardest to predict because you're trying to predict what goes into the coach's mind.
Yeah.
But, I like to think of the example of the ball's on the 35-yard line. It's 3rd and 2. Right now, a coach is thinking, well, that's a 42-yard field goal. And if I miss it, kicker's got plenty of leg. It's through the back. I get a point. So pretty easy decision. Let's take the safe points. I get at minimum 1, probably 3. That same situation under the new rules will be a 57-yard field goal attempt. And plenty of our kickers have legs to get it through the back of the end zone at a 57-yard attempt, but there's no single point reward. So the coach must think right now, how likely is it that I'm going to get a 57-yard field goal? And if I punt it, I've got to nail that coffin corner punt. And if I don't, the field position is going to come all the way back to where I am, regardless if I had an unsuccessful third down gamble. So what I like about it is those tactics, I think, come much more into play. We know that touchdowns, interceptions, and going forward on third down gambles are some of the biggest moments of consequence, and therefore some of the biggest moments of entertainment.
Stewart Johnston is the commissioner of the Canadian Football League with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. I think to traditionalists, the smaller field and the goalpost was the sort of thing that, really gave them the sticker shock. The one thing that we've had the most questions about, though, is the standardized clock at 35 seconds. And I will say that this press conference was on Monday night after the Chiefs and Giants played. And if you watch that game, the final 2 minutes of that football game after the 2-minute warning was played in victory formation. And Andy Reid and Brian Daboll were shaking hands at center with 20 seconds left in the game. That certainly isn't something that I think anyone wants to see come to the Canadian Football League. Can you just clarify how this 35-second clock will work, and how will that affect the final 3 minutes of CFL games, which are famously far more entertaining than any other brand of football I've ever seen because of the way the clock has always worked?
Right. I completely agree. We do not want to land in a world where it's a killed clock for 2 to 3 minutes. Prior to 3 minutes, it's pretty straightforward. When the ball is dead, the 35 seconds starts, and you've got 35 seconds to snap the ball. That's pretty straightforward. And what we love about that is it delivers a consistency that we don't currently have. Right now, that 20-second clock does not start until the referee blows it in, and it on average takes about 15 seconds to blow it in. So 15 plus 20, you're already at 35. That's our current mode. However, it could take 22 seconds to blow it in. It could take 12. It could take 30. We are just trying to get to a consistency. Everybody, the fans in the stands, the coaches, the players, the broadcasters, everyone knows this is how long you have between snaps, or a dead ball to snap. Now, in the last 3 minutes, I am purposely dodging that question because we want to find the right methodology that achieves what you said, that delivers an exciting, comeback-filled last 3 minutes. And we're gonna take that to a group over the course of post this season into early next year, analyze all of that, and we're gonna land in a spot I am very confident where we're gonna deliver some fantastic finishes.
Yeah, just on that, how much is now on the shoulders of the Rules Committee, considering these significant changes for the next couple of years? I mean, I'd imagine that the meetings and the discussions between that group are going to be significantly different because they are going to be dealing with somewhat of the unknown, and I would hope that are going to be able to react to things that maybe don't turn out the way that have been planned or rolled out on Monday.
Absolutely. The Rules Committee has always played an important role. I think the rule they came up with in the most recent significant change that they came up with was narrowing the hash marks. Was well thought through and a great rule, and it's had the impact it was intended to. It's opened up both sides of the field, which is fantastic. So we'll lean on that rules committee again for not only reaction to how things are going under this new setup, but also for other tweaks and other new ideas moving forward.
We had a ton of questions knowing that you were coming on the show from listeners, and I see the clock was one. I mean, Julian and Leslie were asking about that. Another one of our listeners was asking, with these decisions and changes being so drastic, was there a thought of potentially, trying them out in exhibition games first, seeing how things went before making those changes? Or when we're talking about changing field sizes, something you have to really commit to as a group, you don't really have that option?
I think you got to the answer there with the second piece of that question. It was when the infrastructure that's going to be required in our stadiums is pouring new footings, redoing our turf, new paint, and we know if a U Sport team is also playing there, and they don't adopt these rules, we'll just move it back and forth the goalposts, and we'll repaint each before each game. That's fine, but that's pretty drastic to try and go for testing.
You mentioned U Sports, and that's something that I did want to get up, and we've had a lot of people wondering what this means for football in the country. Now, listen, I'll preface this by telling people, if you've just been in Manitoba, I mean, I grew up playing 6- and 9-man and then high school football, Canadian football, 3 downs. It is not uniform around the league. We've got 4-down football being played in BC. We've got 4-down football in some places of Ontario being played. So, I mean, depending on where you are, things are different. But there is a trickle-down effect, I would imagine, particularly for U Sports and at the grassroots level. Have you spoken with Football Canada? Where do they come in all of this? And I guess, what is your hope moving forward that these changes might bring to grassroots football at minor levels across the country?
Well, the first hope is that the changes made at the professional level create such excitement that it grows the game of football. That when all these touchdowns that are going to be unobstructed and more plentiful get shared on social and driven through live broadcast, I hope it grows the game of football simply because our outstanding game is going to be enhanced to such a new level. However, I won't speak for Football Canada or U Sport on the direction they want to go. They're digesting all of this as our fans are digesting it, and they will have to make some decisions. We're fully available to have those discussions with them, to tell them, walk them through all of our work that we've done in the background, and I'm sure they've got a lot to think about. These are significant. We only have 9 stadiums; they've got many more. So that's an infrastructure play. I do agree with you. There are significant differences in pockets of football all around the country, one from another already, and even within field sizes. But whether you're playing in a high school that just was tight and changed its size and just to fit the area that they've got, there are a lot of changes, a lot of differences now. But we do believe that removing a metal obstruction from the middle of the playing surface is a benefit.
Just on that, and this was from another listener. Other than the immediate standardization of CFL fields for the league, where the end zones are the same, I mean, that was a kind of a quirk, almost like Major League Baseball ballparks, where It wasn't all the same. Are there some other long-term benefits that you see in the shorter field, whether it be potentially making the Canadian football game more mobile for special games and other events, or to show this off if this game did or games were played outside of current CFL stadiums?
So I think those are good points, and they are part of the maybe knock-on benefits that I would say as part of these changes, but certainly not really inciting the change themselves. So we would like, number one is more seating available in the stadium, right? It's shrunk by 20 yards, so more places that each of these clubs can look at to bring premium seating, social areas, that sort of thing. It could be a lot of fun. That might be another knock-on effect. But yes, if we're playing a neutral site game somewhere in Canada, maybe it's more amenable to whatever area that we want to go to. Sure, that could be a possibility, but simply not major thought processes that we're going through this.
Stewart, if you could, I mean, probably the one thing that I like to hear, but I was maybe the most surprised in the press conference was that you had, I believe the quote was, enthusiastic and unanimous support from all the partners. Tell us a little bit about that, how it came together, and the will of every team in the league, including the Winnipeg Blue Bombers here, to support this, to move forward for the good of the game.
Yeah, well, I think that truly, once we took each of the league governors through the logic behind the changes and how it would make our brand of football, our 3 down, 65-yard wide brand of football, even more exciting, create more highlight-worthy plays, drive more entertainment, take out player safety risks. There just was, it was almost like a common sense thing. It really did. The logic flowed. So once we talked it through, yes, everyone understood this is a significant grouping of changes. But they said, we all agreed, and they could not have been more unanimous and enthusiastic in saying, yeah, this makes sense. This will drive the entertainment value for our fans further and give our players a much more open canvas upon which to play.
Like anywhere, we've got a lot of passionate football fans, especially here in Winnipeg, CFL fans, and there has been mixed. I mean, some people that, have said, myself, I've said, listen, I'm open-minded, and to me, when it comes to Canadian football, nothing here is a hill to die on. I actually like the way you guys have kind of been creative and modified the Rouge, because I do agree it would not be good for the league to finish a Grey Cup with a guy blasting a punt through the end zone or a missed field goal to win. But the fact that it's still in there, and I think it encourages returns for balls that go in there. I mean, the one casualty of this, unfortunately, is the missed field goal return for the most part. And we saw a very exciting one that could have potentially turned the Bombers season around last Saturday. But again, this is all part and parcel together of moving this product forward. But kind of getting the CFL to where you want it to be, which I would imagine is a duplicate of what's happening right now in Winnipeg across the country. I think there's a lot more to it. This is the first point of emphasis as far as changing the game. What's happening behind the scenes with, trying to get maybe some of these organizations that haven't, for whatever reason, done as good of a job at filling their stadiums, at connecting with their fans. To me, I would imagine that there's a number of phases of how you look to get the Canadian Football League to where you go, and not all of it is just on changing the field or the goalposts.
Oh no, absolutely not. This is one step, and there are more planned, and there's going to be more announcements you're going to hear from us. Let me be clear. No announcements on rules. There's nothing else we're looking at. It's just business, the business of the CFL, the fun of the CFL, marketing of the CFL. That's what we're really focused on now. And so I think from a league office perspective, we're very excited. We're super energized. We see a path for growth for this league to show it off in a way that it never has been before. So we're very excited about the things we're working on. In terms of club to club, last time I was in Winnipeg, I said the Bombers are the model franchise for the entire league, and I'll say it again. It's so impressive what the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have done. Their connection with the community's connection in with the brand and the team is truly second to none across the league. It is impressive. And Wade Miller, to his credit, and this is a point I make to the other members of our management council across the league. It's a grind. Wade Miller's been at it for 12, 13 years. It's not an overnight, success to where it has been. And so you've got to take each step. It's not a magic potion here. It's a number of different things. And Wade has been so amazing at sharing best practices. And not all of them will translate to every market, but they are certainly best practices that I think we all can learn from. And a huge credit to him with all the effort, and him and his team, I should say, all the effort that's been put in and the success that they've seen, that he is such an open book in sharing that formula.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Wade because, I mean, listen, under his stewardship, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have turned into the standard right now in the Canadian Football League. And to be honest, I refer to it as almost a golden era. I mean, growing up, I mean, as good as the Bombers were and as fun as the games were, they were sold out every single game. So, I mean, the job that they've done speaks for itself. And I say this to people that are the real hardcore CFL traditionalists. Wade Miller grew up here in Winnipeg, played high school football here, was a youth sports player for Manitoba Bisons, played his entire career in the Canadian Football League, and is now, I mean, I'm not sure there's anyone that exemplifies what the CFL is about more than him. Tell us about his role in all of this, and I mean, did you have to convince him for a while? Was he all in? Is this something that, I mean, he's a guy that I think carries a lot of weight, not only here in the city, but around the Canadian Football League. And I was interested in a guy that has lived CFL football his entire life, how he came to be on board with these changes along with the organization.
Well, I'm sure you have had or will have Wade on this very show. So certainly ask him. I'd like to hear him describe his reaction. But what I can say is, over the course of our first meeting on it, from start to finish, everyone's reaction, of course, is a surprise and or shock. And then you understand, you walk through the logic. You walk through the logic of what it's going to do for our game. And by the end of it, I will say my interpretation of his reaction was great enthusiasm. And from that meeting forward was outstanding support. He is an important voice in the CFL for all the reasons that you described. And it was important for me to have that meeting with him and that relationship with him.
Now, Stewart, I'm sure you've had tons of response on both sides of this. You know, certainly we've talked about, you know, fans, some not so happy, some, you know, kind of excited to see what this game is going to be once these changes are enacted. But obviously a very important group is the players. And listen, we heard Zach Collaros be pretty positive about it, Bo Levi Mitchell, Davis Alexander. I mean, some of the bigger stars in the game. But the biggest Canadian player, Nathan Rourke, wasn't entirely on side. I mean, what was your reaction to what Nathan Rourke had to say the day of it? How do you take that? And have you spoken to the CFL's golden boy since he went in front of the cameras?
Well, it's you know what's true. I mean, I was at Ted Gavea's celebration of life yesterday. By the way, what an incredible ceremony that was. The speeches were outstanding. It was just really touching and beautiful. And all the Hamilton Tiger Cats were there. So I was able to talk to a number of players, and I spent some time with Bo Levi, and he repeated his comments to me about how excited he is. And that was great to hear. And I will say that the vast majority of players who I've communicated with or who have communicated to me through other means have been very supportive and excited. But yes, Nathan Rourke is a top superstar. Forget Canadian, just a top superstar in our league, and it happens to be Canadian. And first reaction is everyone can absorb and digest and react to news like this in their own way. You know, I don't judge him for having his opinion and his reaction. I didn't, you know, certainly didn't appreciate some of the comments about me and my love for football, because I'll put my love for football up against anybody's. I've been a passionate fan of the sport of football my entire life. And so, but having said that, I respect what he has to say. I tell the story that when he had his first turn at the CFL, I was mesmerized with his play, just mesmerized. It was so impressive. I was cheering for A, because he's a Canadian, but B, because he was just so good. And when he went to try out in the NFL, I paid such close attention to whether he was going to get that opportunity to take the field, because I knew that if he had a chance, he was going to succeed. His skills are that good. And of course, I love the fact he's in the CFL right now, having a historic season and doing what he's doing. All of that's great. So it was important for me to see if we could connect, and we have. We have had a very lengthy conversation together. I'm not going to talk about what was said. However, I'll say it was absolutely filled with respect from both sides. And I think in any situation like that, it's really good to just have a face-to-face conversation.
Well, that is good to hear. And I'm sure the phone and the inbox has been full from people around the country as well since Monday. How long is it going to take you to get through all those?
It's there's been a lot of reaction, and yes, it has been kind of all over the map in the reaction. There's just huge excitement about the changes themselves and what it can do for our game, and then there's excitement just to see what would happen, and then the others who are concerned, and if I could sum up those that are concerned, at least the communication to me, the interpretation I have is it's a lot of concern about what might be next, and maybe even were the intentions exactly how I laid them out for these changes. And so if I could take a moment to reassure you and your audience, there was no nefarious Americanization intention with these rules. It literally was everything I just said about the goalposts. There's so much logic to moving the post back and creating that space for our players to play 3-down football, that the other changes were knock-on effects just to make sure our game stayed intact as it is with goalposts at the back. And going forward, we are committed to the game that we've got. I've got no percentage of my thought process or anyone at the league office's thought process is on other rule changes. We've got lots of work we want to do on the overall business and marketing of our game, but that's it.
Stewart, really appreciate you jumping on with us. I know how busy of a week it's been. Wishing you success and the league success moving forward. Should be a great run to the playoffs. And of course, we'll look forward to seeing you and maybe getting an update during Grey Cup week right here in the Peg in a couple months.
I can't wait.
You've been listening to CFL 110. Tune in next week for more great Canadian football discussion.